design. All our applicants have appeared before us before for this project, the project they're presenting today, or others. So we will forego the kind of preamble here and go straight to approval of minutes. And Jim Rulin, our planning commissioner, was not at the previous meeting. So Commissioner Wu, do you have any revisions or a motion on the minutes?
I do have two revisions. By the way, do I need to speak louder?
I can make it out, but it's on the quiet side.
Okay, I try to speak louder. On the first page, last bullet point, second line, it says recommended applicant look into different door options such as panel doors, stacking doors, or non-wall systems. We do not recommend or endorse any particular product or brand. So I'd like to change the non-wall to folding door.
Okay, is that the only change?
The other change is on page 3, at the very top, add a bullet point. This is about the largest shopping outlet. Add a bullet point reads, commented that building massing balance should be regained in relation to the domed tower and outlet mall.
Was that said at the meeting, or is that something you're adding?
That was said in the meeting.
Okay, as long as it was said in the meeting, we can add it. Very good.
Commissioner Wu, this is Stephanie Rojas. Do you mind repeating that bullet point that you are requesting to be added to the minutes?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I have it correctly.
Commented that building massing balance should be regained in relation to the domed tower and outlet mall.
Did you get that, Stephanie?
I did, thank you.
Okay, you have a motion then, Jen?
With that, I will move to approve the DRSC meeting minutes of the on June 10th, 2020.
With the amendments that you stated. I will second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's Jen Wu and Bart Crandall, and we have one abstention with Jim Rulin. Very good. We will go on to item 2A. This is the Cultural Heritage Permit 20017, Giobi Residence, 318 West Avenue, Gaviota, and Kyle Weber is our planner.
Good afternoon, subcommittee. Can I get confirmation that everyone can hear me? Okay.
Commissioner Crandall can hear you?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. Okay, so this is Cultural Heritage Permit 20-017 Giobi Residence, 318 West Avenue to Gaviota. This is the second review for this Cultural Heritage Permit. First review was May 13th. The project is applying for a Cultural Heritage Permit due to its adjacency to two historic properties, 320 West Avenue to Gaviota, which is adjacent to the property, and also 319 West Avenue to Gaviota, which is across the street from the project site. Last review, DRSC committee members made recommendations. concerning the number of landscaping, the percentage of landscaping in the front yard setback, and also the potential obstruction of the historic structure next to him with the revisions made to the proposed garage. The resubmittal that the applicants turned in are now showing compliance with the 50% landscaping in the front yard setback. On page 2 of the staff report, they're showing 52% permeable soil in this area, and they did this by removing some of the pavers and also reducing the size of some of the pavers. Probably the most talked about topic was the potential of the garage obstructing the historic portion of the historic property at 320 West Avenida Gaviota. And what we're showing on page 3 of the staff report is that the height of the garage, the plate is staying the same, and the eave of the roof is being removed in order to actually make the historic portion of the property more visible coming from the north down the street the project site is on. And so we are increasing the height a little bit, but with the eave being removed, it is hopefully this image on page 3 of the staff report is showing that the historic portion of the property is actually more visible. Some other recommendations that the subcommittee gave was adding some articulation to the garage, what the applicants did, and they also they changed a little bit of the landscaping to show some of the trees that the subcommittee wanted to see. They did not add palm trees, but they did maintain the olive trees that are existing in the front. When this was sent out, one letter was sent to staff, and I believe was forwarded to the subcommittee members from the property owners across the street at 319 West Avenida Gaviota in support of the project. 2 other members of the public expressed via phone, not in written comment, concerns with some of the trees in the rear of the property. If we can look at sheet L3 of the landscape plans, show certain trees in the rear, which are western red buds, which are designated by in, let's see, I believe it's S1 or T1, I'm sorry. So there's 3 trees in the rear that are western red buds that are designated as T1 on the landscape plans, and their concerns are that those trees planted there over time might end up obstructing some of the view from the adjacent property at 316 West Avenida Gaviota. And these landscape plans have gone through a conceptual process with the city's landscape reviewer, and that was approved conceptually. And that there are these concerns from the public, which can be washed out through the Planning Commission meeting. Planning Commission meeting currently is scheduled for 7/8, pending on the remarks and recommendations we get from DRC subcommittee members today. We also have the pleasure of Ian Buchan, the architect of the project, on the call today, and also the landscape architect of the project, Brad Morton, if there's any concerns or questions that need to be addressed. That concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, very good. We'll open it up for the applicant or their representatives to make any comments if they so choose to.
Yes, this is Brad Morton with Morton Design Group. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for your time today. I just wanted to clarify something that Kyle had mentioned. There was a mention of 3 western red buds being proposed in the rear property. There's actually only 1 red bud, and it is actually behind the envelope of the rear right corner of the house as you face the coastal canyon. And it's there specifically to create a little bit of screening and privacy between the 2 structures. So although the concern is valid, it's not a large tree, and it's tucked again back behind even the home the envelope of the house, so the house would obscure the view as well as the tree. So I just wanted to clarify that. That's the only place the red bud is proposed. There's not three of them. There's one of them, and the other three symbols down along kind of the edge of the coastal canyon where their existing property line chain link fence is just toyon, and that'll kind of blend it right in with the existing toyon that's down the slopes even further. Just a comment.
I am not familiar with the growth pattern of that particular tree. How large does it get? How full is it?
Yeah, if you do the research, there's a couple at 150 years, it could be as tall as 45 feet. The growth rate's about 24 inches a year potentially. Height is 10 to 20 feet and 10 to 20 feet in width also in the early years of the growth pattern. So it just kind of, I guess, depends on water and positioning and how it's thriving. So it's just not it's a medium-sized tree, but I guess there's historic data that could show that it can get up to 45 feet tall within 150 years.
Okay, very good.
It's a smaller specimen, though. We didn't put anything large on purpose.
Okay, Commissioner Rulin, do you have any questions for the applicant or his representatives?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Commissioner Wu, do you have any questions for the applicant or his representative? Okay. Kyle, was one of the letters you referred to the one from Julia Darden?
There was one letter that was sent, and that was from the property owner at 319 West Avenida Gaviota, and that would have been, it came after the report was sent.
Because I received one this afternoon from Meredith Scott, forwarded to me from Julia Darden, and I wanted to make sure that both Jen and Commissioner Rulin received that.
I did. I reviewed that. Yes.
Okay. Jen, did you receive that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, very good. And it was in support of the project, and we all know Julia and respect her. She's a smart and talented lady, and thank you for participating in the process. Okay, we will close questions for the applicant. Other than the letters we just commented about, there were no other public comments that I'm aware of. So we will open it for discussion. Commissioner Rulin, you were not at the first meeting, but I'm sure you fully read the minutes of that meeting and the report. Do you have anything to add to Kyle's report?
I don't. I reviewed the materials and the minutes from the earlier meeting. I think you guys covered it well. There is some small concern about the ultimate height of that tree that you were asking about, but that may be far in the future and not it may not actually end up being a problem at all. Other than that, I think it's a beautiful renovation, and I think it's going to add nicely to the neighborhood. So I would be frankly happy with it going on to planning.
Okay, Commissioner Wu.
I'm going to support this project. I would say the silver carpet paving, that's a good idea to increase the driveway surface. However, I feel that I think they're very narrow.
I apologize, Commissioner Wu, but I know you're speaking, but I really can't hear you at all. You're very, very faint.
Hello.
Okay, why don't we, Jen, why don't you try to make a connection with just the phone rather than the video? Because we don't have video right now of you. Maybe that'll be clearer. Keep this going for a couple of minutes so you can make contact.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me
Just to take up a little time.
I will.
This is Kyle. So while we wait for Commissioner Wu to call in, Brad, the people who called about this particular project, they mentioned some trees, multiple trees in the southwest corner of the property that they were worried about growing. I just want confirmation that the only trees that would be large, or maybe not even trees, they're shrubs, and they wouldn't be above so many feet. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Correct. Yeah, I don't know if they are referring to existing material that could be there, that will not be there after the renovation, or if they are referring to something that we've proposed. But if you down on the slope toward the end of the project's, just the edge of the footprint where we plan on beautifying and renovating, the tallest tree down there is the Toyon, and at complete mature growth, that should only be 12 feet tall, according to the CalScape setbacks and heights and all that, all the information that's provided there. The tallest tree, again, is the redbud. It's up by the envelope of the home, and it's on CalScape. It's only supposed to get 10 to 20 feet tall and 10 to 15 wide. So again, there's different information depending on where you go, but we rely on CalScape a lot for our information. That's the California Native Plant Society. So I don't have any, Michael and I propose no other trees down below or past the envelope of the home. They're all considered shrubs, and nothing should be any higher than 12 feet at maturity, which is quite a while. So
okay.
That's about all I can comment on based on what we are proposing.
Okay, very good.
Thank you for the confirmation.
Since we are waiting for Jen to make a new connection.
I'm just back.
Okay, let me just make one comment to Brad then. If you could make an outreach to the people who made these comments and have a response prepared for when this goes to Planning Commission, so we can hear exactly what trees or bushes they were worried about and your reaction to their comments. That would be very helpful at that level.
Absolutely. Be happy to do that. I'll assume Kyle can provide me with that information, and then I will go ahead and make that happen.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, Jen, would you like to chime in again?
Yes. Well, when I joined it, I was told that I was muted. It's maybe that's the same reason for my video conference. I saw some message saying I'm muted, so I have to tap something to speak. So, but anyway, on this project, the only comment I would like to make is the silver carpet in between the pavings on the driveway. That's a good idea to increase the permeable landscaping area. Although I feel that the about plus minus 8-inch width is on the thin side. I've seen people having those landscaping perpendicular to the garage door. So when you drive in, you have wider landscaping in between the tires. But other than that, I think this revision is good. I'd like to support it, and I think we can move it to the Planning Commission.
Very, very good. And I wanted to thank Ian for, he was the designer on this project, for working with us and clarifying our questions. I think he did a good job of that. And
You're welcome.
And I am also in support of moving this along to the Planning Commission level. So that's 3 people who agree. So I'll once more confirm with Jim Rulin and Jen Wu that they agree to move this forward to Planning Commission.
Yep, it's good with me.
Yes.
Okay, that's 3-0 to move it along to Planning Commission. Thank you very much to the project team on this one.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The next item is agenda item 2B, conditional use permit amendment 19405 and minor cultural heritage permit 19411, Ragalet CUP amendment and exterior improvements. David Carrillo is the planner on this, and I believe we just received a late email letter, actually just a few minutes ago, on this one. Did you receive that, David?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Okay, if you would, when we get to, I guess it would be public comments, I'll have you read the letter.
Okay. So assuming that you guys can hear me, I'll go ahead and move on. And then Brian from IT, do we have the PowerPoint up?
We do have the
Was that you, Stephanie? Brian, can you confirm that the PowerPoint is up on the screen?
David, I can comment. It is up on the screen.
Yes, David, you're good to go.
Okay. Okay. So hopefully you can follow. Yeah, so this is a second review. Again, this is David Carrillo, Assistant Planner. This is a second review of this project. The first review was on June 10th, 2 weeks ago. And it was recommended that it return for a second review for exterior improvements, specifically on the roll-up doors. Slide number 2. Just a quick background, just in case we have audience that were not here for the first meeting. The project is within the Creative Specific Plan in the mixed-use zone, mixed-use 4 zone, architectural overlay district, and pedestrian overlay district as well, which is governed by the city's local coastal program. In the LCP, it's also known as the Visitor Serving Commercial District. And in these areas, we ensure that we have SCR, Spanish Colonial Bible architecture, where it's practical, as well as high quality architecture, and we ensure that we have pedestrian-oriented uses. So slide number 3. So here's a picture of existing conditions where we see the French doors and some transom windows behind the awnings. They're not that clear, but they're somewhat visible. Lagayette currently occupies a space behind the French doors to the right of the entry. So with this permit request, they'll be expanding to the left of the entry door to eventually occupy the entire ground floor. Slide number 4. This is a rendering of the original design. So here we see 10-foot tall openings and dark brown aluminum windows, or roll-up doors. And I'll explain a little bit more on the next slide. So next slide. So here's a side-by-side comparison of the existing versus the original design. One of our main concerns here from staff and DRC was that the apparent height was increased due to the removal of the transom windows, which gave it an industrial-like appearance. With that change, we also got the impression of garage doors. So DRC's recommendations in response to that was to explore a way to break up the height of the proposed opening by leaving a fixed transom or using mullions to create an appearance of a fixed transom when the roll-up doors are closed. Another recommendation was to provide a brochure or details that explain the material and color of roll-up doors, and to ensure functionality of lighting, HVAC, and other ceiling installations and to ensure that they're not affected by the roll-up doors. And lastly, it was recommended that the applicant consider the use of the wood material. Next slide. So this is is a screenshot of a image that staff used in the previous staff report, where we provided a reference line. We recommended that the applicant use this reference line to help break up the heights of these roll-up doors. Next slide. So here we see the new design on the bottom right. The applicant has proposed 24-inch salmon-colored sills under each opening, except for the patio door opening to the left. So this reduces the apparent height. We did recommend that the height be broken up by keeping a transom window or doing some type of change to the top of the opening, but instead they addressed this by focusing on the bottom and providing this sill. Staff believes that the color is too similar to the Ole Hansen pavers, so we are recommending that the DRC provide feedback on this item to determine if the salmon color detracts from the pavers. We also see a decorative entry door in the middle, where we have a crown grille above the entry door that helps balance the scale and the height. So that will meet the height of the 10-foot tall openings. We also have a base panel at the bottom, which meets the height of these sills, and again helps maintain the pedestrian scale, which is encouraged by the design guidelines. DRC did ask staff to identify a design guideline that touches on the entrance, and we did find one which encourages special emphasis at the entrances of buildings. And we do find that this change is consistent with that design guideline. So moving on to the next element, which is the patio doors to the far left. This door will have decorative base panels, as you see there, and will also have glass panels instead of the metal mesh that was originally proposed. So it will be open during operating hours. However, when closed, the decorative base panels do help break the apparent height of the roll-up door. And again, this matches the height of the sills. One of the changes here with this new design is that the railing behind the roll-up doors will be removed. Staff recommends that the applicant keep the railing so that when the roll-up doors open, we still have some type of building elements at human scale. Next slide. So here we have some close-up sketches. The proposed material is aluminum material, and we do have the applicant, Mark, and architect Henry Lenny to provide more details on that. The RC recommended that the applicant consider a wood material. The staff supports this aluminum, given that it's consistent with the window material policy, which is provided in attachment 2 of the staff report. So here we see that the existing vent above the entry door is integrated into the grill. We did mention in the staff report that we will be providing a brochure details on the doors, but we do have, again, the applicant and the architect available to discuss this. So staff recommendations to DRC, again, is to determine if the stucco sills should be painted a different color to avoid the potential to detract from the Ole Hansen pavers. And then a recommendation to the applicant is to install a railing or keep the railing that they originally proposed or other barrier behind the patio roll door. And again, this is to help maintain building elements at human scale when the doors open. And the public comment. Do I read that now, Commissioner Crandell?
Let's wait till public comment on that.
Okay.
So, okay,
that was our presentation.
Okay. I do have a question, David. Commissioner Wu brought up a very good question, and I didn't see it answered in the presentation, that when the doors are up, Because I'm assuming these really aren't roll-up, they are sectional doors, is that correct?
That's right.
How is lighting, fire protection, etc. handled when those are in the up position?
Yeah, so we did, we do apologize for that. We did speak to the applicant regarding that and acknowledge that that was something that was requested by DRC. So again, we do have them available, the applicant and architect, to help provide information, but we do again apologize that we weren't able to provide it in the staff report.
Okay, because I am curious how we handle the fire protection, etc. Because if we did opt for wood, it would probably be most efficient to use an overhead door, a one-piece door, which would in fact block any lighting that's above it. So it is probably some information we need to make a decision on, particularly this is going to commission level?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a little latitude that we can give direction on that. Okay, Commissioner Rulin, do you have any questions for the applicant or?
No questions at this time, thanks.
Commissioner Wu, do you have any questions for the applicant or David?
No, not really. I just wonder if a two-top door comparing to sectional garage door type would it be more suitable, because when the one-piece panel two-top, it acts as an awning, and also it will provide some protection to the people because it provides shade. Protect the from the rain too. It will project into the public right of way, but it's up in the air, so I feel it would be okay. But no, I don't have any other question.
Okay, I understand, is Henry Lenny here to address this particular project, David?
I believe so. I was told by the applicant that he would be attending the meeting.
Since he is here, and it's always wonderful to hear from him, I'd love to hear his comments on this during the presentation program. So Henry, you've got the floor if you'd like.
Hey, David, can you let me talk?
Hi, Mark. Yes.
Can people hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Commissioner, Chairman and Commissioners. Henry did get the information. I know he called me just ahead of this with the intention of calling in, so I'm hoping that he figures out the technical aspects if he's not having success getting in right now.
Mark, I see his name on the screen at this time, so he may not be at his phone, but...
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Before that, can I speak? Would it be possible for me to just make an introduction?
Yes.
Just to kind of lay out how we got to where we are. So, again, we had the meeting a couple weeks ago, got great feedback from you guys, and we knew that we needed to try to solve the basic question of how these openings read. And it's interesting because one of the concerns was that they kind of read too industrial or too much like a garage door, and you're right, they are sectional doors of the type that are used quite often in restaurants and bars these days, and you can really make them look nice. But we recognized the concern that you were raising, and it's interesting because this building originally, these were 6 garages. I don't know if people know that, but this building had 6 single-car garage doors when it was originally built, and then it evolved into a ground floor office and then converted to some small retail and restaurant spaces. And so that's how we got to where we are in terms of the dimensions of the openings. But we knew we needed to get someone really creative on this stuff. So we called up Henry right away, and Henry thought that he had a real elegant and simple solution that he'll speak to, but the main point being to increase the verticality of the main entrance door, add sills, and then reference the patio sectional to the main door so that they read together. And we're real happy with that. We're also happy to take input from the commissioners in terms of color and what have you. We're not wed to a particular color. On the technical question of whether these sectionals can roll up and still function with fire and lighting and everything else, again, we don't have the construction drawings or the precise design of the remodel yet because we're not at that stage. But there's certainly many, many examples of these sorts of sectionals rolling into the space and and being able to be done consistent with all the other constraints. And obviously, we would have to meet the building constraints, or it won't go forward. So, and then on the question of the brochure, we would have been happy to give a brochure, but as Henry will speak, they can customize these doors in a way that the brochures don't show. And so that was kind of the constraint that we had in terms of showing you a standardized brochure that doesn't quite reflect the styles and the rails the way that you can customize them and the dimensions of the individual panels. We opted not to send you a standard brochure because it's going to be a little bit more customized than that. With that, I'll let Henry talk to you about some of the thoughts that he had when we presented him the design constraints and how he approached it. So, Henry.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, and now can you hear me? I think I had my phone on mute. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay,
yes,
great.
I can hear you. I thought of your project.
Anyway, when I started saying that instead of this phone call, I wish I could be there personally, just to get away from Santa Barbara for a while. But anyway, here we are. Well, in general, let me begin with the general concepts and the specifics a little bit later on. Our intention is to keep the awnings that are there because it really does soften the building significantly. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, you do know that the street slopes significantly, actually. And that was a factor in the decisions that we made to present to you what is in front of you. One of the things when I initially started with these projects, the roll-up doors went all the way down to the bottom. And indeed, they looked industrial, as one of you have commented. And so we put the sills or the curves on the buildings for a practical reason, is really to contain the water when it was raining and so on and so forth. And the second one is to reduce the height of the door itself. So let's talk about the sill. Traditionally in architecture, there was always a wainscoting. And I think our forefathers, all the way back to the Renaissance period, realized that if the building was white, painting some kind of a base a different color, and it doesn't have to be the salmon color. It can be anything. It can be something that is compatible, more compatible to the Ole Hansen tiles that we have there. And so we have a lot of flexibility there. The other option is to keep them white, but it would be good to give some accent. By painting the sills or the curves a different color and allowing the white columns to come to grade, it gives the illusion of greater height, which this building desperately needs. And so let me now jump into the door itself. If these were not doors and they were fixed windows, there are numerous examples in Spanish colonial revival of using what is called a quadricular pattern. They were generally done out of steel. And you find many examples, I think in San Clemente, Santa Barbara, San Diego, and so on. So we started out looking for a door that had mullions or the steel sections or the aluminum sections to be as absolutely thin as possible. And we did find a door. It was a very contemporary door that we found, and it did not have any vertical mullions. And so these doors are going to have to be modified from the manufacturer's specifications, which they can do. But the idea is that all of the elements of the doors become very, very delicate, and again, consistent to some of the designs that we find in the 1920s. They are segmental doors. So the horizontal elements that you see are slightly larger by virtue of the fact that they have to contain the hinges and so on. But then those are mitigated by the verticals, which are actually applied to the door itself. The height of the door, the 10 feet of height of the door, is to allow the rails of the door, once they're inside, be as high as possible, because our ceilings, again, were restricted as far as the ceilings are concerned. Once they're rolled up inside into those rails, there are going to be some challenges, as someone mentioned, the idea of the sprinkler heads and so on, which would probably have to be modified, and they have to meet the requirements of the fire marshal in order to do that. But it is possible to do that. The entry door itself, it's a 7-foot door currently, or a 6'8" door. And one of the comments that, David, I believe you suggested, was to really keep the top portions of all these openings pretty much the same, and that's what we're trying to do. There is a necessary vent that needs to remain there, and the thought was, fine, let's leave the vent, let's change the grill of the vent to be steel, and let's apply a decorative transom element there. Again, the transom would not be seen from the exterior, or it will be if you look up, because of the awnings. But it would be appreciated from the interior of the building, which would be quite nice. The steel is proposed, the entry door is proposed to be steel, and it's all custom made with panels at the bottom and the transom, the decorative transom on top. Now going to the left of the elevation, we do have a patio door. In that patio, there's currently a handicap ramp, so that is actually level to the finished floor of the building. In that case, rather than having a curve, what we decided to do is to apply a decorative base pattern, which would be three-dimensional. In other words, there would be several layers of steel with some clavos in the middle, or anything else. There's a million possibilities. And that way, the door is slightly differentiated, but the condition is different than the rest of the doors. The openings of the buildings themselves are very similar, and they vary by inches. They're 7'9", and some are 7'6", but that would not change the look of the building, because, as you all know, we never appreciate buildings in elevation. We always appreciate them in perspective, unless you're far enough away that you can perceive the whole building at once. By that time, you lose a lot of the detail. So, that is the general concept. Now, once the doors are in the open position, there will be a 24-inch sill or curve that would take care of the necessary requirement from AVC to have some sort of a, not a barrier, but some sort of definition of where the interior and the exterior is, so that people don't wander with their liquor, beer bottles and go outside. So this would preclude people, or at least it would provide a warning to people that they need to stay inside. And there's all kinds of things that we can do besides that. We can add a rail, but in this particular case, I believe that the simplicity is really what's going to work the best. And again, if you can imagine all these doors in the open position during good weather, and San Clemente has good weather most of the time, what you will see is the action and the design of the interior and so on. So, in a nutshell, this is what we're proposing. Again, the comment of the transom at all the doors, we can certainly apply some decoration on top. The problem with it is you will never appreciate it because of the awnings, which I believe, again, should remain, or it should be replaced with other types of awnings. So, anyway, if anyone has any questions or anything that needs clarification, I'll be delighted to respond to any of your questions.
Thank you, Henry. It's always great to hear from you. This is Bart Campbell.
Okay, yes.
Can we have David, can you read the letter that came in from this evening, the one email? Go ahead and read it at this time. I'd like to get Henry's response to it.
Okay, here it goes. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The Pier Bowl is a conglomeration of Spanish colonial revival and mid-century beach architecture. It is charming and quaint, and people love the look. Steel roll-up doors do not seem like a feature that will add to the character of the street. DRC asked the applicant to consider other options, but that does not appear to have been done. Those steel doors might just rip the mid-century charm out of the building. Someday soon, the Pier Bowl may be considered for historic district designation. Let's make sure that we do not permit anything that will be detrimental to that purpose. And that's the end of the comment.
That is from Mr. Culbertson. Henry, do you have any comment to that?
Yeah, just to begin, I think this building is far from being Spanish colonial revival by any stretch of the imagination. However, in the past, particularly here in Santa Barbara, a building that does not comply to the Pueblo Viejo ordinance, in other words, the Spanish colonial revival, it is very much encouraged to try to do, whenever a remodeling occurs, an effort to try to bring it closer and closer to the guidelines, in the same guidelines that you have in San Clemente. One of the things that we are planning on doing, and as we go along, we'll develop the details, we are introducing a crown molding where the second floor begins, and that is currently not there. So it would be a very pronounced molding there. There are other things that we can do, but I'm not sure that they're necessary. And some of those things are to introduce some capitals to those columns, and even perhaps a base. Not sure that we need that yet, but in my opinion, this approach, the fact that they roll up doors so they could be fixed windows, it doesn't really matter, because in the open position, you'll see the interiors, and there's plenty of buildings that are open to the air. They're called loggias, or they're called patios, or they're called enclosed patios in many cases. So the attempt here is to make those doors to be as traditional as possible. Now, let me explain why wood in this particular application would probably not work. If you're going to have the wood mullions, they significantly increase in width because we cannot have true divided lights. So everything would look much, much chunkier, and it would really step away from the traditional philosophy of the Spanish style. Now, in the old days, they used to have mullions, glass mullions, that were very, very thin, but they were true divided lights. Now, true divided lights in this day and age are extremely, unfortunately, extremely difficult to achieve because of Title 24, the energy code. Every time you make a break in the glass, it reduces the efficiency of the energy-saving elements. So what we're left with in this case is the steel. In fact, we began by looking at steel doors as opposed to aluminum. But we found that given the treatment of the door, whether it's steel and aluminum, it needs to be treated with paint that is resistant to the ocean, because the salt there will eat up anything and everything. In the end, the steel would look identical to the aluminum. My initial concern when Mark asked me to study this is that aluminum tends to be larger when it comes to the elements to make the door function. But since we're only applying the vertical elements, we have a choice of creating the width to any size that we want. And my personal preference is to keep them as thin as possible. So every time you see a horizontal band where the doors would fold, they're going to be slightly thicker than the vertical elements. Now, as Mark indicated at the beginning, once we go through, and if this meeting is favorable to the approach, our task is to provide you with actual samples, not only of color, but also of width, the specific details of it, before we sign a contract with a door manufacturer. So the other thing to remember is these doors will not be on the jambs on the sides of those columns that you see. They have to be inset a little bit so that a rail can be installed. And so what that's going to do to the building is we're going to have to increase the thickness of the walls of the columns. Again, it's another approach that brings this building back into Spanish conformance. So the doors will be set back, and they will be set back from the current doors by necessity. And so, therefore, you know, I understand the letter that you received from this gentleman, but again, my goal working in San Clemente for many, many years is to really bring anything and everything that we can more into conformance of the architectural guidelines. And this is one start. If the owner of the building wants to do additional modifications in the future, meaning doors, windows, rails, and so on, there's going to be an opportunity to do something that, again, brings this building further into conformance to the guidelines.
Well, thank you very much, Henry. You answered the question I was looking for. Do either Jen or Commissioner Rulon have any questions?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Wu. I just have a quick question, Henry. The drawings are prepared by Architectural plus Engineering Consulting Services. Henry, what is your role here?
Well, I'm really acting as a consultant at this point, as I have with many of the projects in San Clemente. As you probably know, I was fortunate enough, and it was my honor to write the architectural guidelines for San Clemente, as well as Santa Barbara and some other communities as well. So when there's a difficult situation, I am called in to see if improvements can be made based on the concerns that the Architectural Board, the Planning Commission, and even the City Council has. So in this case, go ahead.
Are you going to be designing the details in the shop drawings?
Absolutely. Well, here's how it's going to work. Before we sign up with the manufacturer, I usually require the manufacturer to do two things: to provide shop drawings for every single opening, because again, they vary slightly. That's one thing. During the phase of the shop drawing, my task would be to make sure that the intent of the design is carried out the way we hope that it's going to look. If there's any changes to the detailing for whatever reason, if we find that some of the elements are getting, say, thicker in the profile, then I would bring that to the attention of the manufacturer. So hopefully my intent is to stay with this until the doors are completely fabricated. And at the same time, any changes, as small as they are, we will share them with David, and to make sure that we're all on the same page. My approach to this is a collaboration between all of you, the planner, the client, and the designer. Things always end up better that way. And incidentally, I welcome any suggestion that anyone has, because I find that working in a vacuum sometimes is, things don't go too well. You know, the more ideas, the better. That's my approach.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Rowland.
Thanks. It's always great to hear from Mr. Lenny, but I don't have any questions right now.
Very good. We will close the presentation portion. We've already heard the public comment, so we will open it for discussion. And I think there's a little massaging that still needs to be done. David, this goes through Planning Commission and Coastal Commission, correct?
This is David. That is correct, Commissioner Kanda.
Okay, so we don't want to hold it up, if at all possible, to keep this thing moving. I think they're so close, but there's some technical issues that still remain. I think ABC may want a railing that's probably 36 high to keep people from walking or just stepping over the little low wall. So that's something to consider in the design. but I think it's things that can probably be addressed and presented to us at commission level to keep this thing moving, because I think we're all in agreement. We'd love to see this project be done. It's just a matter of detail at this point. So I'll give Commissioner Wu the floor, and let's get your comments, Jen.
Thank you. Before we make those motions to move to the commission, can we talk about a few things?
Oh, absolutely.
Because,
we're doing.
David wants us to make a decision on the color of the wall underneath the windows. Also, it appears that we're going to have some additional railing behind the roll-up door of the patio. I don't see the drawing here, so can anyone explain to me? Once the roll-up door rises, that's opening to the exterior, then do we have a railing there with a little gate?
The fenced patio, I believe.
Yeah, that's leading to
Well,
the patio.
if I may answer that question, unlike all the other doors, that particular portion of the building is flat and it's level with the finished floor elevation of the building. So that is the reason why, if you put a curve there, then there are some handicap issues that I think we're going to be faced with. In fact, that rail that you see on the exterior of the building, and that is the single purpose of it, is basically an ADA, a handicap issue. So, therefore, the door at that portion, if it's going to, and if that is a required ADA exiting or entrance to the building, even though we have one at the entry door, I think that door has to have one additional panel at the bottom. And so, but it is currently it is a handicap ingress and exit to the building, the patio area.
Okay. So what about the color of the low walls underneath the proposed windows?
Well, again, any color. Well, not, I shouldn't say any color, because if chartreuse is not going to work. But whether it is an off-white to begin with, that is differentiates itself from the face of the building, I just think it would be good to give this building a base. And it doesn't have to be salmon, it doesn't have to be gray or blue. It could be just 2 or 3 hues darker than the color of the building. And that would give a very, very subtle difference, and it would create a base. So, if anyone has any suggestions, I'm completely open to anything that you may suggest. But that is, the color is not a critical element here, as far as I'm concerned.
I've been around there, but I'm looking at the image from Google Earth now. The columns of the narrow wall between the doors, and they already have a base there, and they're dark green, looks like a dark green marble color. Are they still there?
You know, to tell you the truth, I don't know. You're saying that those columns already have a capital or a base?
A base. Based on a Google image, Google street scene image.
Oh, well, that's even better. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that on the photographs.
Jen, I'm looking at our picture on page 9 of the packet. And I don't believe it's there now.
No.
Oh, okay. So the page 9, that's a recent image?
I believe so.
Okay, then probably the Google image is old.
Yeah.
Okay.
But our guidelines
But
do
again-
say earth tone, so I think we can leave it at that for now. There
I
is-
would, and, mhm.
And Jen, just to clarify what you were saying, if you go to page 13, there is, it looks like, a base, it's almost a base. It's hardly a wainscot along the sidewalk. So,
Yeah.
but I think we can improve on that.
The page 13 existing condition is, okay, yeah. While page 13 is the existing condition, then there is a base. That's consistent with what I see on Google Street Scene.
Okay.
So I think for the little 2-foot wall underneath the window, they either be white, similar to the wall, or the same color to the column base.
Yeah, well, I'll be very happy to do some studies on that. And any additional detailing that would, again, bring this building back into a little bit closer to the Hispanic architecture. So, you know, we'll look at those elements there.
Yeah, that's okay. I think we can look at it again in planning commission level.
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner Rulon.
Thank you. When I was looking at this, I was thinking about the surrounding area, and it's kind of an interesting spot for us. You know, we've got the piers right across the street, which is a historic structure, and this is an SCR architectural overlay area. And our general plan calls for identifying mid-century modern buildings to add to our historic registry. But we haven't done that yet, and we don't even have design guidelines for mid-century modern buildings. And then as Mr. Lenny pointed out, we tend to want to pull buildings in these architectural overlay areas more towards Spanish Colonial Revival. But I don't know how much we really want to do that given these other things that, you know, might be going on. And kind of what the sort of reduced to its essence, my feeling is, as Mr. Lenny said, simpler is better. And you know, the kind of more simpler doors that he was describing, I'm good with. I don't want. I think we need to be a little careful that we don't add stuff here that in a few years we might regret because we try to make it more SCR, but then it turns out we have mid-century modern guidelines. I'm not specifying what those should be. We don't have those. But we do have in our general plan to start to protect more of our mid-century modern buildings, whichever ones are selected for that. So sort of what it boils down to for me is the basic structure of the doors okay, particularly if those mullions are a little thinner. I do think the color at the bottom, the salmon color does need to have a little more contrast with the tiles. And so I'd be interested in seeing what ideas Mr. Lenny comes up with for those. But other than that, like you, I feel like this is already the second time around in design review. They have to go through coastal. If we can keep it moving forward and we're reasonably comfortable that we're going to see appropriate changes at Planning Commission, you know, I would be okay with moving it forward.
Very good. I concur with Commissioner Rulon, and I'm not even opposed if you want to use a hard finish underneath these windows and even across the base of the what we're calling columns. They're just separating wall to avoid pedestrian damage, skateboard damage, etc., to what's below the windows. So it could be a natural color. It could be some kind of faux stone or anything like that. But I think we can look at that. It's just a couple of details, and I don't think that's going to overwhelm at the Planning Commission level. So I am comfortable moving this along. There's a lot of information the applicant needs to resolve. You know, the height for the AB alcoholic control board, railings in and out, how to keep people from putting drinks on top of this sill when they're sitting at a table at the sidewalk. But small details, I think the concept is great. So I'm comfortable with moving it forward if Commissioner Rule and Wu are.
With it.
Commissioner Wu?
I still have a little concern about the height. I think with the current height design of the door opening, we have probably just enough clearance for the motor and for the mechanism to operate. As a result, the door, once it rises, is going to float below the ceiling, the flat piece. And how do people, when people walk by and look into the building, how does it look like? But with that said, I'm willing to give a benefit of the doubt to Mr. Larry, and move to the Planning Commission.
Would you repeat that, Jen?
With that said, I'm willing to support it. I'll give the benefit of the doubt to Mr. Lenny, and support it to be moved to Planning Commission.
Very good. Yeah, I think there's a good team with Henry Lenny and Mark McGuire and the applicant who want to do the right thing. And these doors, sectionals, can pull up behind the fascia and actually go tight to the ceiling. They've got special hardware to do that. So hopefully when it lays flat against the ceiling, the end of the bottom is not visible. It's tucked up behind the soffit. So we're in agreement, 3-0 to move it forward. So congratulations to the applicant and his team. And we will move on to the next project. And Henry, are you staying for the next project also?
I beg your pardon?
Are you staying for the next application also?
Which is that item?
That one is the In-N-Out hamburger.
Oh, that's right. I didn't realize that it was going to be today. I'll be delighted to stay here and listen.
Okay, very good.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay,
thank you very much, everyone. It's really great talking to all of you.
Well, thank you. The next item is conditional use permit 19346, site plan permit 19347, architectural permit 19348, discretionary sign permit 19349, Pico Plaza and out 115 via Pico Plaza. Katie Crockett, you are in charge.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The proposed project is a proposal for a new In-N-Out drive-through restaurant at 115 via Pico Plaza. Because it is a new commercial building, it does require a site plan permit and architectural permit. The drive-through use requires a CP, and the signs require a discretionary sign permit. Oh, you know what, Tara or Brian, do we have the presentation available for this item? Thank you. So if you go to the next slide, we can look at the project location, which is highlighted. It's also on page 1 of the agenda packet. It is at the intersection of Avenida Pico and Via Pico Plaza, adjacent to the I-5 freeway. As such, this is a general plan designated gateway area, and Spanish colonial revival architecture is required. Next slide. The project includes demolition of two-story office buildings. You can see the existing street views here. The top is from Via Pico Plaza, and the bottom is from Avenida Pico. Next slide. The overall project area is 76,509 square feet. As previously mentioned, 2 office buildings will be demolished to make way for the 3,882 square foot drive-through restaurant with an outdoor dining area, parking, and landscape. The DRSC previously reviewed a preliminary application for this project. Modifications since then include improved circulation, additional drive-through stacking, additional parking, and Spanish colonial revival building architecture. As you can see on the site plan, which is page 37, next slide, sorry. As you can see on the site plan, which is page 37 of the agenda packet, the building is located along the street frontages near the corner, and the outdoor dining area is prominently located at the corner, creating an inviting street scene. Parking and trash enclosure areas are located to the rear and side of the building. The project has been reviewed by the city's traffic engineer and contains sufficient stacking for the drive-through and parking in excess of what is required by code. Next slide. The applicants have been working with staff on the design of the building to ensure it meets the city's requirements of high-quality architecture and gateways and employs a Spanish colonial revival design. The top elevation here is the primary north elevation facing Via Pico Plaza, and the bottom is facing the parking lot and drive-through. As you can see, architectural details include single-barrel clay tile roof elements, smooth white stucco, arches, and colonnades, wrought iron detailing, and divided light windows and doors. 2 round tower roof elements are utilized to accent the entry doors. Next slide. The left elevation here is facing Avenida Pico, and the right faces to the rest of the shopping center to the east. The applicant has employed a simple design with traditional Spanish colonial revival elements while meeting the unique functionality required for the business. Also of note on these elevations, utility and equipment doors are dark wood look in keeping with the architectural design. Next slide. The signs proposed to meet the signs proposed do meet the development standards with the approval of a discretionary sign permit. The signs include 2 halo illuminated channel letter signs with the in and out arrow logo. The monument sign is designed to be consistent with the building architecture, including a stucco base with wrought iron detail and halo illuminated individual channel letters and logo. Likewise, the directional signs for the drive-through are an appropriate design matching the color, the stucco color, with a wrought iron detail and routed push-through illuminated letters. The applicant proposes LED cove lighting at approximately 123 lineal feet. Next slide. The city received a letter from architect Henry Lenny, who you heard from earlier, and who consulted on this project as well. Nevertheless, staff does have 2 recommendations that could improve consistency with the design guidelines, which include removing the LED cove lighting, which you can see a bit of here on the nighttime rendering that the applicant provided, and also to modify the windows or arch openings to mitigate the disproportion of the windows to the arches. So you can see there the windows are located in recessed arch areas, but they conflict with the design guidelines, which state that those arches should be respectful of the actual shape of the windows. Modifications in that respect could include a decorative detail in the balance of the arch above the windows, since they cannot raise the windows into that arch. This concludes my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have of staff. I want to note that Jim Lockington with In and Out is also on the call to speak for the applicant and to answer any questions the commissioners may have. Staff received no public comment on this design other than the letter received from Henry Lenny, which staff forwarded to you earlier, which I can read into the record whenever appropriate. Thank you.
Why don't you go ahead and read it now so we have it available to us while we discuss the project.
Okay. Sorry, let me pull it up. I wasn't expecting you to want me to read it right now.
Well, since
Okay,
we got
here we go.
Henry here, we may have questions.
All right, well, here we go. I have got it. Dear Mr. Lockington, I have reviewed your latest submittal to the City of San Clemente, and I found that the implementation of your drawings are consistent with the collaboration of your team, myself, and your planner of the City of San Clemente. The project had improved significantly. In my review, I took careful notice to the proportions of the building, including contrast and variations of the massing of the building, the thickness of the walls, the application of the decorative accessories such as light fixtures, ironwork, and the treatment of the various conditions and detailing of the roofs. In regard to the red LED lighting discussion, I am not concerned that it would negatively impact the integrity of the architecture. I understand that is an important feature that defines the branding of your company. I am very much impressed with the results of the design and the collaborative effort of the entire team. I believe that this building, once completed, will contribute to the architectural fabric of the beauty of San Clemente. Finally, there will be further opportunities in the construction document phase to further refine some components of the building. Kind regards, Henry Lenny, architect.
Very good. Okay, Jen, do you have any questions for Katie?
Yes. I wasn't in the meeting of the preliminary review, and so, Katie, if you might give me a little history about the circulation, why we have a circulation pattern that is so circuitous.
That is so circuitous?
Yeah.
Well, so to be fair, I wasn't in that meeting either, Commissioner Wu. That was over a year ago that the Design Review Subcommittee reviewed it preliminarily. But the main change that was made is that the applicant has secured additional land in the shopping center to allow for better circulation. The reason that I guess you could say the circulation is still circuitous is that it is a very irregularly shaped site, and the shape of the site has not changed. The size of it has increased since the DRSC previously reviewed it. And when we're working with existing sites like this, we do have to work with the conditions that are presented to us. There were several designs, I believe, presented to the Design Review Subcommittee. That's how it appeared to me based on the records. And the Design Review Subcommittee did seem to prefer the designs which placed the building towards the roads, so at the corner where it is now, to hide the stacking, the parking, which is also consistent with our design guidelines, as you know. And so I believe they're just working with within the constraints of the site, including some easements and the other various things. And the applicant may be able to speak to that even better than myself.
And since we have two curb cuts, if a customer comes over and take the first curb cut naturally, but they want to get out of that first curb cut, first driveway cut, they cannot go back to Pico because they have to drive. They have to make a right. The median just is in front of that curb cut. Is there any plan to revise that center median to allow people to make a left from the first driveway approach?
Yeah, so this is actually something that we've been discussing with engineering, and it is a comment that they have provided. They are considering modifying that median based on the traffic, both the traffic studies that the applicant has submitted, as well as their own traffic analyses, and they are considering shortening that median so that a left out could be possible from the first curb cut, but that is not yet finalized.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think we'll have a lot of discussion on the site plan. Commissioner Ruin, do you have any questions of Katie?
Yeah, I have. I think these are mostly just clarifications, making sure my understanding is correct. One is the quality you can taste sign, that yellow neon sign. I assume that that's inside the store, not outside?
Yes, it is. Inside the store.
And on the, I believe it's the southeast elevation, there's a kind of a relief image on the wall of the crossed palm trees. It looks like that is not included in the square footage of the signage. Is that correct? So
It is not.
You're not considering
It
it
is
signage?
not in, well, it is not included in the sign program. Staff did comment on that. I don't believe it puts them over their maximum allowable, but as you noted, it was not included in the sign program. And if it should be, we can certainly ask the applicant to do that.
Okay. Let's see. The other question I had was, I guess it was a question about that, the flow along the lines of Commissioner Wu's question, but we'll handle that in discussion. That's all my questions.
Okay. Katie, on the site plan, you counted directional signs as part of the sign square footage, correct?
No, we did not. They are not a part of the sign square footage. They meet the sign requirements.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what?
No, continue. I'm sorry.
They meet the requirements for directional signage. Directional signs are sort of exempt, though, from the business signage, provided they don't include, like advertising elements. So they weren't included in the overall sign area for the business in staff's review. However, they were reviewed for consistency with the development standards and design guidelines.
Okay, because I concur with Jean. He may have seen the same location I saw, that there could be, they provided, it appears, plenty of stacking spaces for lineup, but there's some other places that may cause access problems that may need some directional signage, so we'll address that during discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so if no more questions for Katie, we'll open it for public comment. Katie, are there any other letters that came in that we are unaware of at this time?
No other comments.
Okay, we will open this up for discussion. I'll kick it off on the site plan. And Jen, I'm going to walk you through what I see here.
Can I interject briefly,
Certainly.
Commissioner Crandall?
Certainly.
The applicant, Mr. Lockington, is on the line.
Oh, good.
If you wanted to hear from him separately from the letter from Mr. Lenny.
Okay, I think this is complicated enough that we may actually call on him during our discussion.
Very good.
This is usually our working sessions where we work across the table with the applicants, and we aren't able to do that, so we'll try to do the best we can and do that on the web here. But at the northeast end, Jen, I see that we've got the potential for cars exiting the site, going up to that top driveway, and if there's 3 cars wanting to exit the parking lot at the northeast end, that blocks anyone from getting into the queue who would be exiting off via Pico Plaza. Is that one of the areas you thought was a little circuitous? That's directed to Jen.
Well, I just assume that someone would naturally take the first driveway cut.
I think that's
They
the
come
best way
in.
to do it.
If they want to get into the drive-through, they would make a right to the end of the site, to that point corner, and make a tight turn and awaiting the line. And there may be some conflict with the other cars trying to get out. I understand this is irregular shape, but it seems like there's got to be a way to organize. Well, look, if we take that northeast driveway as as a one way, let them come in, and take the first driveway cut as an exit only, but allow people to make a left there, then things will appear to be more smoother and to reduce the conflict.
It may be more intuitive, yes.
Yeah, and they don't cross each other.
Okay, let's ask Washington if he's what the team kind of walked you through on the circulation of cars on the site.
Yeah, greetings, subcommittee members, staff. I'm very pleased to be here and working with you on this site. Let me preface comments on circulation by saying that we recently added 30,000 square feet to this site, and it is vastly superior to what it was before. We supported it, and staff supported it before as well. With respect to circulation and conflicts, there's the first driveway on Via Pico, and as you know, customers for in and out tend to be habitual, repeat customers. I think our repeat customers are going to be pretty clever, thoughtful. They'll know that the best entrance is to make that first right into the site to find a parking spot, and repeat customers who are looking to enter the drive-through will know to use the second one. We will, of course, have wayfinding signage on the site to help direct people who may not be as familiar as a repeat customer to get to the drive-through. But I'd like to make one thing clear, and that's at the end of the property boundary at, say, car 30 in the drive-through stack, you'll notice that there is additional parking stalls. That is additional area that is not part of our lease premises, but that drive aisle continues through to another curb cut. So I don't think there's going to be any significant issue with people being able to exit the site, because there's actually 3 curb cuts available to customers who wish to leave the site. There's the first and second that you see on the project site plan, and there's a third one which accesses a number of other commercial buildings, including, I think, a Del Taco. So I do appreciate the commissioner's concern, but I don't think it's a significant issue. And the project had a very thorough traffic analysis that was vetted by city traffic and public works staff, very, very carefully vetted. And there are no significant issues with stacking based on the volume of cars that are expected to enter and exit this site.
Okay. Jan, you still have the floor if you'd like it.
Yes. Well, I don't see any problem with stacking it. You have such a long line here, so I don't see any problem with that. So, okay. Let's move on to other issues.
Well, I actually have some input on this particular issue. I don't know. I'm happy to wait, Bart, or I can jump in.
Go right ahead, Jim. We're in discussion, so let's.
Yeah. And I appreciate that there's a lot of repeat customers to in and out. I'm one of them. But I still have a concern. It doesn't alleviate my concern about the traffic flow. I think, Bart, you said it perfectly. When you're looking to exit there, you get 3 cars up there, and now someone pulls in. It's going to be hard for them to find the end of that, or the entrance to the drive aisle. I think also we need to consider that there's an exit right across the street from the post office, and that intersection there right at Pico, it does get backed up. So, there's even a possibility, I don't know if the traffic engineers have looked at this or not, but there would be a possibility where the traffic could get to the point where people are waiting in line for a left-hand turn on Pico, and now the people who want to pull out and turn left there out of that first drive aisle, they could actually not be able to turn left, or they'll pull into the street and cause some gridlock. So unless we've got some really, sure statements from our traffic engineers, my preference would be to make sure that first drive aisle is an entry only, and then the second drive aisle is exit only, and actually have the geometry on the curb cuts be where it's obvious and inconvenient to make the wrong kind of turn from there. I think that's going to get people to the end of that drive aisle a lot smoother, and keep from getting jammed up and help the overall traffic flow there, because where people are exiting and making that left onto Pico, they're going to have a lot more room before they're blocked by some line of cars. In fact, that far back on that second drive aisle, I don't think cars are going to line up that far back. So the in and out customers are going to have more room. Of course, with in and out there, we might find people making a left on Pico that does get that drive aisle backed up, or not the drive aisle, but the actual that street, the Via Pico Plaza street. That could get backed up at that point. So that would be another sort of reason or safety measure for having that first drive aisle be entry only and the second drive aisle be exit.
Okay, very good. I think the recommendation probably to Mr. Lockington would be, I think if this gets pushed forward to Planning Commission, that you have a presentation showing exactly your traffic flow that you anticipate, how it works, and walk us through how it's going to work, rather than letting us, since we don't know if it's in, out at each one of these traffic aisles, whether you're going to try to get people to come in the first one and then make an immediate left to those parking stalls, or if you're going to encourage them to go straight. I think we really need to know what the plan is for the function of the parking lot, and I think the whole commission will be very interested in that, as we are, and it would be helpful to have that presentation made at that time. Would you concur, Jim and Zen?
Well, if the feature, if the median doesn't get shortened, just in case, I believe it should. But if it doesn't get shortened, then we'll have to put a sign there, say right turn only.
Yes, absolutely. It changes things, changes the whole pattern.
Right.
Would you concur with that, Mr. Locke?
Yeah, thank you. I think those are all very thoughtful comments. In our experience, however, restricting driveways such as we have here tends to have unintended negative consequences rather than positive consequences. The situation with the left turn from Via Pico out west onto Pico is a situation that was specifically studied in the traffic report. So I would be happy to set something up. Maybe we can do a PowerPoint or some type of stop motion thing to show those movements based on traffic counts. And I would be happy to prepare that and present that at Planning Commission. We definitely want your approval to go forward to Planning Commission. We want to be successful at Planning Commission. But at this point, we would, based on our understanding and having knowledge of the traffic analysis, which you guys may not, we would be resistant to restricting accesses as you guys have discussed here. But we're open to whatever the city thinks is sensible, but we do want it to be underpinned not necessarily with just concern or worries, but with the actual traffic analysis.
Yes, and so the whole purpose of the Design Review Subcommittee is to work with you to get this project in a position to move forward and to make it through the system. So that's what we're tasked with. Okay, so I think enough on the site. Since we do have Mr. Lenny here, let's talk about the polling a little bit. I've got some comments, and I've gone through the guidelines, et cetera, and the one thing about Spanish Colonial Revival is it appears to be extremely simple, but it's hard to do. It's hard to make it simple. And I've got some technical questions and just some design questions, and maybe Henry can address those. I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact we have two primary towers that compete with each other. And everything I see usually has a main tower and then a second tower that is somewhat subordinate to the other tower, maybe not even of the same design. And it appears in the detail, which I don't think Henry was able to get into, both of the rotunda type towers have caused trouble with the arches and the simplicity of the project. The entry right now, the front two walls of the building do not align. If you look at the main entry, the wall on the left is about a foot or so in front of the wall on the right of the rotunda. So the arches on either side of that rotunda are different and kind of irregular. And I think a little adjusting, particularly at the seating area, to get the front walls to align would make that rotunda symmetrical. Would make it easier to start and stop the arches that are there into the rotunda. And it would also allow the window to the left of the rotunda to be equally spaced from the rotunda on the left as it is on the right. It's about 2.5 feet to the first window on the right-hand side, but it's only a foot or 6 inches to the left. So if that window's moved to the left, it would make that front elevation just the simple Spanish colonial revival kind of elevation where it looks simple even though you had to work at it to get it there. And then in the comment about the two towers, one being subordinate to the other, the one on the patio, I was seriously thinking that to be subordinate, it doesn't have to be a round one. That particular area didn't lend itself for the arches and all. But if it were a rectangular tower, a little lower, and it was approximately 12 foot on all sides, it would allow the window pattern that goes along the front, which are about 6'6" wide with an arch, to have a 6'6" wide arch on both the side and face of that square. I don't think anybody will be able to see this, but let's see. No, nobody can see it. Okay, it's not going to work. And these are not.
You want to reference the page that you're on?
That was page 12 of the drawings. These are make or break issues. It's just really a good design to simplify things. If Henry agrees on the towers, that's wonderful. And keeping all the arches similar. I think you've done a great job. You know, let's try this camera here. No, well, that's what it would look like with the smaller rotunda. You'd see it would be about 3 feet lower than the main one. It would be in the same location. Everything would be uniform, and just is a refinement and massaging. Consider this more of a design development approach than redesigning. It's just trying to make it work with the system and the guidelines.
Yeah, the applicant can't make heads or tails of that at all in this.
No, I totally understand that. But you get your signage, you get your towers. I can get it to Katie, and she can pass it along. I can even, well, that's why I don't like these online meetings. Henry, do you have any comment about the basic concept of a main tower and a subordinate tower versus two heavy towers?
Yeah. Let me, let me just clarify something. At this point, and at this phase of the project, there are some refinements, as I indicated in my letter, that are opportunities to really begin to refine exactly what you're talking about. We did do numerous studies in collaboration with Jim and his team initially, but we're at a point in which the most important thing is the rhythm of the building and how it flows, and the difference of every elevation, which is another approach to design a building. There are some things, like I indicated in my letter, that some detailing, some forms, some manipulation of forms of the towers is probably one of them. But I think the next step, there would be an opportunity to look at every single elevation and analyze it to the point that we can actually begin to refine things. And those would be inclusive of the comments that you have indicated and your concerns. So those we will address. And so there's this building is eccentric and a little complicated, but you know, eccentric is not bad. It actually pulls it away from the predictable look of functions like this. So I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to refine the building a little bit more. Again, I think we were very interested in your comments and your concerns, and I think we will address those.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that kind of triggered it was the shape of the columns supporting the rotunda on entry. They're just regular kind of, I don't even know what shape we'd call it, almost a triangle. It just seemed awfully forced. So
yes,
we'll
look at that. But keep in mind that those columns in the round towers, if I recall correctly, Jim, they're about 18 inches in thickness, I believe.
Oh, and base.
Yeah. And that was generally, when you have circular forms, you see things at an angle. And sometimes when the walls are too thin, they're just not credible, if you know what I mean. And so maybe it's, but I agree. I think we'll look at some of these things and we'll consult with one another to see the best way to proceed forward.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, if the applicant could respond, please.
Certainly.
So I'm kind of surprised at the comment regarding the primary and subordinate tower. I'm not sure that we'll be able to do much about that. We had an enormously lengthy collaboration both with staff and with Henry. And Henry is our consulting architect. Henry is not the architect.
Understood.
So I want to be respectful to his involvement and to the collaboration. We'll probably be reluctant to make any wholesale changes. I've made copious notes of the comments. The comments regarding the windows on either side of the primary tower and the wall planes, that's a function of our floor plan. And one reason In-N-Outs functions so well is we don't redo the floor plan every project to project. So we try to work within exterior architectural design guidelines with the floor plan as is and work from the floor plan out, and we think we've done that very successfully here. But I've made a note of those. If it's possible for us to work on that balance, we'll certainly do that. I can tell you that the dual round tower elements is something that the owner of our company feels very strongly about. She made that quite clear. So moving away from that might be a challenge for us. But we'll take all of your comments and act on them to the extent that we can.
And I will make sure that I get my scratches, my hand scratches, over to Katie tomorrow, and then whoever wants to get them, she can have them copied. And they're just thoughts. We're making recommendations here. We're not mandating anything.
Thank you. I do appreciate that.
Commissioner Wu.
Yes, thank you. I'm flipping through pages of all these greeneries. I think this is a good starting point, well, more than starting point. Overall, the building massing is a good design with a lot of articulation and some attention to the details. So that said, the corner rendering at Pico and via Pico, that's actually the least one I like. I like all the other ones. My comments focus on two things. One is the building massing, detailed later, and the other one is signage. They're related. And the minor one is the window shape. So the building massing, I echo Chair Bruno's comments that these two round towers, they look identical. I'd like to see some differentiation. The slot that cut off from the tower to accommodate your sign, it goes against the idea that the signage needs to fit the building, not the other way around. They're not around the tower anymore, and it looks as if we have a big round wood peg, then you cut a slot, just in order to give you a flat background for the signage. That's not authentic for architecture. I think for at least one of them, you ought to be able to fit your signage on the curved wall. Now, the visibility from certain angle may be compromised a little bit, but to see two of them from the same street corner, I just don't think I can take that. One way to solve that problem is to change one tower into a rectangular tower, or change top portion of it into a rectangular shape, or octagonal shape, or whatever that is. Another way to differentiate them is to change the height slightly. You want to keep both as a round tower, then maybe one is slightly taller than the other one. Right now they're almost exactly the same height. From the street corner of Via Pico and Pico, it just looks too repetitive, and it doesn't have that what I look for from a asymmetrical Spanish architecture. The red LED strip light underneath the eave, I don't think I can support that one. It's too commercial, and it's part of the signage. It would be considered part of the signage, but I welcome a white light to provide a floodlight effect on the top of the wall. The last minor comment about the window side behind the thick wall recess on Via Pico is that this window could be a little narrower. is a traditional window. They're more vertical. Do you call those? No, they're not column. They're not colonnade or arcade. It's just pilaster. So the window, I like to see the window to get slightly narrower to give some wall space on the side of the window. But that's all. That's all my comments.
Okay, Commissioner Rowland?
Okay, I do overall, like it. I did see it last year, and I think it's, it's come a ways. I think, I know one of our concerns at the time was, actually per a question that Commissioner Wu had asked, one of our concerns was just, with in-and-out success. We see a lot of in-and-out stores with cars going into the street, and it's almost like you can't have a big enough drive aisle, long enough drive aisle, but I think you've got about 30 cars there you can fit, so that's that's about what we can ask. That's a lot of cars, and knowing how popular you guys are, you still might have more than that, but I think with 30 you're getting above the bar of what most people are able to provide, so I do appreciate that. The cove lighting, that red LED cove lighting, that's something that's a bit problematic in our town, as Commissioner Wu kind of covered. Whether we do something in white or red, in any case, I think we're going to need to be very careful with the intensity of the lighting, and the same goes for the lighting for the halo signs. In the renderings we have, that level of lighting looks nice. It's, it provides a nice mood, but in my experiences, light tends to be much brighter in an attempt to advertise the building, understandably. But I think that's, both for if there's cove lighting, and certainly with the pin-mounted signs, we're going to have to talk about not just the color of the light, or the K of the light, which I think you have is 4,000 K, if I'm not mistaken. But that's going to have to be dimmable so that perhaps staff has, as a condition, the ability to say, well, that's too bright for the city or for the environment, and it needs to be brought down a notch. That's something that we have. That's not an unusual condition for, say, the LED signs in gas stations, which can be turned on very high sometimes. So that is a concern of mine with the signage. So I'm letting you know as something perhaps if you can alleviate those concerns in future meetings, that would be a good thing. But yeah, the red, as far as the red light goes, I mean, I get it. It's got a kind of nice, that's sort of a corporate branding thing, and I sort of appreciate the mood of it. But I'm just not sure. We don't usually do that sort of thing in San Clemente, so I'm hesitant on it. I noticed that there's actually a monument sign next to the monument. You're proposing a monument sign next to the monument sign, and that's also next to your building, which has two prominent signs. There's questions of being able to make the findings for a separate monument sign, and I won't go into that because that happens at the commission level. But just looking, from seems like a little bit of overkill to me. I also agree with Commissioner Wu regarding the sort of the slots created for the signs in the towers. They I think affect the look of the tower a little bit. Again, I understand it, but it would be nicer to have either something more organic to the tower. I know Mr. Lenny had done a nice kind of ovid sort of place for signage at the Starbucks on Pico and I-5, which I think is, everyone actually liked quite a bit. So something more along the lines of that so that the signage seems to be placed in a more organic space in the architecture, I think is going to help your design as well. I did notice with the landscaping along the sidewalk, I was looking again to remind myself, and I couldn't find the page I was looking at. I think it's listed, things max out at about 4 feet, which means that pedestrians could look over. Drivers might have a little more difficulty. It's 4 feet is, that might be enough for there. I kind of appreciated you put that landscaping all along the Pico area. I think we do want, you've got a lot of parking area there. And while a chunk of it's behind the building, behind the architecture, that's great. But I do think we want to make sure that there's enough landscaping there to really soften and hide portions of the parking lot. So I just wanted to make sure that 4 feet might be enough, but I just wanted to bring it up in case I was wrong about how tall it is. A couple of other things. Oh, the crossed palm tree relief image on that southeast elevation. I actually like it. I mean, it's a nice way to do a corporate logo. It's both prominent on that area, but not overbearing. But I think that it sounds like you've had some conversations with staff about it. It would seem to me that would have to be part of the signage, and you may be under your signage square footage for signage right now, so including it as part of your signage might not be a problem, which would be great. But I think that's something we need to consider at the planning level, at the commission level. I think that will very likely be brought up as an issue if it's not included in the square footage for the signage, since it's such an important part of the corporate image. I do agree with staff on the proportion of the windows. I think some solution needs to be made for that. They do look a little bit awkward underneath those arches. And something I tend to bring up with parking lots a lot is the shade. When I look at the landscape plan, it doesn't look like there's a lot of shade offered to the both parking and the drive aisle. On a summer day, someone's waiting in their car and there are 25 cars back. That can be a bit of a wait in the hot sun, running the air conditioner, that sort of thing. So there's both the comfort of the drivers, but also just how much fuel is being used, how much the air conditioner is being run that uses fuel. So that's something to consider too. It might be nice to have some sort of canopy of trees, particularly along the drive aisle, that helps to protect that a little bit. And the last thing is a comment that I have so far is this is not a problem we normally have in the city, but you are overparked by about 30 or 40%, I think. Usually the problem is opposite, so because I'm fully for you. But it does sort of raise the question of, in a suburban area, a lot of a parking lot is not, in terms of good land use, it's not ideal land use, right? Because how much are you using that last 30% of parking? Once in a while, but maybe not, certainly not all the time, not 7/24. So just what comes to mind with that is we want too little parking, we don't want too much parking, we want the right amount of parking for good land use. Would it be right to dedicate some spots and remove some spots in favor of planting more trees in the middle of the parking lot? So we've got more shade, actually canopy trees as opposed to palm trees. So we have more shade for the people who are parked there on a hot summer day. They come out, they get in the car, it'd be a little more pleasant. So that's a thought for you. As long as you have the minimum parking, I know you're going to, as long as you're over that bar, that's kind of what's important in the city, because we're used to seeing obviously not enough parking. But it would be nice. It might be a good thought for you to look at, since you've got that flexibility, providing more landscaping or shade or more bike racks or some other leverage the land in a way besides just parking if you since you're overparked. So those are the observations I had on review and after comment. If you've got any questions, I'd be happy to clarify as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jim. I will concur with Jim, and I believe Jen also, that the cross columns are basically the equivalent of the golden arches, and it is a sign because it's a logo, that should be included in the sign area. As far as the red light along the soffit, I'm not hesitant at all to say I can't recommend to Planning Commission to approve that, because we currently, even on gas station canopies, et cetera, don't allow the in architectural overlay zones and gateways the color on the facial. which basically this is doing except for the light. One thing I'm sure Mr. Washington knows is we don't want to get into design on the day at a planning commission meeting. We want to have it all resolved prior to it getting there. So we've got 3 of the 6 planning commissioners here tonight that we can get everybody on board that everything's tied down tightly and correct. We can make the recommendation then to planning commission that we agree that it's ready to go to the commission level and be reviewed and approved. The one thing I will say is you've got, we are very receptive to this project. I mean, all of us, I believe, have stated that we like the project. It needs just some fine tuning and refining to meet all the standards that we're required to review it by. I think staff's done a pretty good job, but I think with a little time, and it shouldn't take time to do what we're talking about. It's all just fine tuning. That with your project team and all, you can turn this around very quickly. And I think with the amount of massaging that appears to be made, I'm of the opinion I'd like to see it come back to design review with these resolved, so we can say this is fantastic, let's move it on to planning commission, and then we don't get into a position of having to a long run out meeting at that level and move it along. So that's where I'm at. Jen, do you have any additional comments?
Since Jen talked about the overarching, now I realized that we have a planar space on the site. So one thing I can improve the look from the front elevation or from the street of the Pico and the Pico Plaza is that we have 4 wide windows on the Pico Plaza with deep recessed colonnade. It is possible that we can make it a shadow. Well, it's not colonnade. We can make it a shadow colonnade here. That's probably going to improve the look of the building because it creates a shadow. Also, the window behind the colonnade then isn't as much of a concern. You can have a full storefront if you want, as long as you have that shadow colonnade or arcade in front of it. Right now, the window shape causes some concern because it's wide and it's almost a square shape. Right? I think if you have the space, if you pull the building backwards, well, let those pilaster or column to stay, then it will create a shadow colonnade. That's one way to improve the look from the street corner, which is the most important perspective for us. The backside looks very good because of the cover portion of the drive-through. The front is a little plain, plus the 2 towers, and there's not much differentiation here. In summary, I concur with the Chair Croner's recommendation that this design comes back to the design review.
So I can respond to that item very directly, and that we will not be doing that.
Say that again?
We will not be moving the building further back on the site to create an actual colonnade. We'll try to address the comments responsibly, but that will not be one of the ways we do that. I just want to be very clear.
And we'll be very clear ourselves. As far as the windows in the archways, there is a shadow line and your design team can look at it. It may only require a 10-inch deep or tall lintel line across the top of the windows to make it appear that the windows fit more nicely within those archways, and in no way do any of the design suggestions that I'm giving you change the floor plan. It doesn't change your useful working floor plan one iota. It's strictly cosmetic and to keep it more in keeping with the design guidelines, which we're tasked with protecting and enforcing.
Yeah, what was the suggestion you had just a second ago to put on top of the window in its current configuration? I didn't understand that.
Oh, just to add some interest in those archways with the windows, if just a foam shaped 10-inch lintel going across the top of the window we put there to just fill in the top of the arch, fill in the arch opening a little bit, that might be sufficient.
Thank you. I didn't understand that. I got it now.
Okay. Let's hear from everyone one last time here. Jim, any last thoughts?
Maybe just one more thing that I saw with the menu sign. You know, I think it's, I tend to see, I know that you've done some work to make it Spanish Colonial Revival, but it still has a bit of a modern feel to it, or contemporary feel to it. I think it's probably something that would be okay, but you might want to also take another look at it. I think there's a possibility of doing a little, you know, doing a little better treatment on it. But otherwise, I do agree with Bart and Zen. I think I do think they should come back. And just to be clear, you know, part of the reason to bring this back, a big part of the reason, is to make sure that when you go through Planning Commission, you, at least in the design aspect of it, it's pretty frictionless as possible when you get to Planning Commission. So we don't hate to have you, come back yet again. I know you did a pre-approval and that was great. I think it was helpful to you and us. But there's just enough, I think, to the questions that we have and issues that we have, that if you bring it back, you're going to have an easier time when you get to Planning Commission.
Commissioner Wu?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that all of our comments are advisory. None of them are mandatory. So you take all, this is for the applicant, you take all the notes, the inputs, and think about them and see what you can implement to give you a better chance to next time. And that's all.
Yeah, we all want you to be successful here. And since looks like we lost Henry here, so we won't be able to get his comments. But would you like to make any last statement, Mr. Lockinson?
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate commissioners. I appreciate the input. There are some things that have been discussed that are probably quite easy for us to do quickly. Some of the larger elements that have to do with, say, the towers, those could be challenging because the design you have in front of you has been endorsed and, in fact, contributed to a great deal by the owner of our company. And I'll do my best to be responsive to those comments, but I don't know how successful I will be on some of those. Honestly, I was hoping that at the conclusion of this, we would, especially since Henry Lenny was supportive of the building and also supportive of the red LED, I was hoping we would advance to Planning Commission with a recommendation for approval and with no changes. So I guess I've got to get my head around the current situation.
Well, we're working with you to avoid any pitfalls. That's I think what we've done here tonight. I'll give these sketches and you can take a look at them. I think they're simpler than you may suspect. Not necessarily in the corporate world, though. Getting it through the approval process. But I think it will benefit both you and us. And following the parking, you know, unfortunately, COVID's kind of changed the market a little bit. I've been up at the the La Pata and El Toro in and out a couple of times in the last month or so. And there is 3-lane stacking where they have to get people guiding the cars to let people out of a gas station that all the parking's blocking and all. So people are going to be sensitive to that. So make sure we address that circulation like we suggested, give everybody a comfort level.
Absolutely, yes, sir. I do want to say one thing about about the lines at In-N-Outs currently. It's pretty clear that during COVID we're providing an essential service.
Oh, you are.
And we're even overwhelmed by it. Stores that haven't had the benefit of very modern site design, you know, some of our older stores in particular, are suffering a bit due to the attention that we're getting. But you know, we always do everything we can to react and respond to those things. You know, this site is a very large site. The comments about maybe sacrificing some parking for some canopy trees, I think that's very well taken and something that's, you know, something that's easy for us to do. But it is interesting in these times, especially when the dining rooms were 100% closed. It was really amazing to see that people still wanted their in and out. I think in today's society, a lot of people aren't cooking for themselves and want something quick and wholesome. So we're excited, and thank you for the comments that everyone has made about the support that you all have for this project. I do appreciate that, and the company appreciates that, and we look forward to coming back to you.
And we look forward to working with you, and we're thrilled with your success, and we'd love to have you here in San Clemente. Okay, do we will, let's see, Katie, you there? Okay. So we'll have it come back. I will get you my sketches and ideas. So if you want to make copies of them and send them off to Mr. Lockington and Mr. Lenny, that you have my approval to do so. They're just thoughts. And do you have any questions, Katie, on our direction?
No, I do believe I have a pretty clear understanding of the recommendations.
Very good. Then we are done with the agenda items for the evening. Do we have any new business? I see none. Any old business? I see none. Oral and written communications? I see none. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
I will move we adjourn to the next adjourned regular meeting of the Design Review Subcommittee to be held Wednesday, July 29, 2020 at 4 p.m. in Council Chambers, 100 Avenue, Presidio, San Clemente, California.
Jen, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I see 3-0. All in favor. We are adjourned.
Hey. See you next time, guys.